Hi, mystery readers. I'm Alexandra Amor. This is It's a Mystery Podcast, and I'm here today with Stephanie Pajonas. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, how are you today?
Very well. How are you?
Doing great.
Oh, that's good. All right. Well, let me give our listeners an introduction to you. Stephanie S.J. Pajonas is the author of several book series, including the Miso Cozy Mystery Series, which we're going to talk about later today. Stephanie is a writer, a knitter, amateur astrologer, Capricorn, and Japanophile. We're going to talk about that as well. She loves foxes, owls, sushi, yoga pants, Evernote, and black tea. When she's not writing, she's thinking about writing or spending time outside unless it's winter. She hates winter. Someday she'll own a house in both hemispheres so she can avoid the season entirely. She's a mom to two great kids and lives with her husband and family outside New York City. Well, it's such a treat to talk to you today, and the reason I was really intrigued about your books is because they're set in Japan, and we mentioned in the bio there that you're a Japanophile. So how about we just start with you? Tell us where your fascination about Japan came from.
My fascination with Japan has been long-lived. I think that I became a big fan late in college, so that's be like 1998. I graduated in 1998, and it was around that time that the Miyazaki uh, anime were really popular here in the United States. So it was like Princess Mononoke and Kiki's Flying Delivery Service, and all of his great anime, which were just lovely. And I started watching those, and then I became friends with someone who had actually lived in Japan. So I asked her all these question after question about what it was like to live there. And I don't know how it grew from there, but it just did. I moved to New York, and there is a place in New York City called the Japan Society, and they have Japanese language classes. So I thought, well, I'm an adult and I'm living in New York City. I'm going to spend my spare time learning Japanese. So that was like 7 years of Japanese classes in the city, which was great until I had my first child. And along with that, just comes when you're learning Japanese, you learn about the culture, you learn about the food, you learn about, the way people speak to each other. It's not a language that relies so much like the Romance languages, where a table may be a male and like a chair may be a female. I don't know if you studied like French or Spanish or whatever, but instead in Japan it's like a level of hierarchy of if you're speaking to your family, it's not the same kind of language or verb tenses, that you would use with like your boss or your boss's boss or somebody you don't know. So understanding the culture and understanding like the levels of society became part of learning the language. So it became a fun thing to study on my off time. And with that came everything else. So I've been to Japan twice. I was there last year at this time, actually. And when I decided to start writing, I decided to take my love of Japan and fold it into my fiction as well. So then that gives me a chance to study the culture even more, like what it's like to own a bike in Japan, like the smallest little things that I can fold into my fiction. It's
Oh,
a lot of fun.
I love that. That's amazing, and I love hearing that you've been to Japan twice. That was going to be my next question about whether or not you had kind of were writing your books virtually, but it sounds like you've had exposure to different places in Japan, including Tokyo, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so last year at this time, I was in Japan. I was in Tokyo, and I also spent 2 days in Kyoto. I took the bullet train from Tokyo to Kyoto on my own and had a great time there. I think I spent like 9 days there last year. I even braved a typhoon when I was there. A
Wow.
typhoon blew into town, and it was very, very rainy. And I spent the day in my hotel, but it was a lot of fun still.
Oh, that's
It was
fantastic.
only that one day.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so tell us about, we're talking today about the Miso Cozy Mysteries. And so your main character is Mei Yamagawa. So tell us a little bit about Mei and let our listeners learn a little bit about her.
Well, before I started writing the Miso Cozy Mysteries, I was writing my science fiction series. So I also write science fiction. And in that series, I had a really competent woman who was my main character, and I really enjoyed writing her. So for this series, I decided I really wanted to write somebody who has a really hard time at life. She doesn't get along well with work in general. Like, she's had 3 or 4 jobs, and they just haven't worked out well. And she doesn't know what she necessarily wants to do with her life. So while she's like a very competent and loving person, she doesn't get along well with the whole work environment. So at the very beginning of the series, we get to see her being fired from her job, and she has to go home to her mom and her mom's farm in the rural part of Japan. And when she arrives in town, her best friend's father is he's found dead. So they didn't realize that he's murdered at first, and then it comes out later that he was. But one of the fun parts about writing Mei is that she is discovering herself over the course of the series, like what she wants to do. Like, she put aside a love of painting when she was a kid that she was really good at. And in order to go into business and to try to do the whole fast-paced Tokyo life, which she realized she wasn't very good at. So she comes back to painting, and she realizes that her mom is a really important part of her life, and the farm that she grew up on is also very important to her as well. So she has a little bit of a rocky beginning. She doesn't always make the best decisions, but eventually she does grow into herself and grow into what she wants to do with her life.
Oh, nice. I love hearing that. And I think I read somewhere in one of your book reviews that she feels kind of like a failure because she's tried the big city Tokyo life, and now she's coming back to the more rural life. Did she feel a lot of pressure? Was it internal pressure or external pressure that took her to the city initially, do you think?
I think that this is a very common thing in Japan normally, is that a lot of the job opportunities, a lot of the modern lifestyle are in the cities. So Tokyo and Kyoto and Osaka and all of these bigger cities attract people from the rural parts of Japan to the city. And what happens is all of these rural towns are left to the point where hardly anybody is there anymore. So the jobs in those rural towns dry up, and then the towns sort of become like a ghost town. Mm. So there's this news station called NHK World. I'm not sure if you get it where you are, but it's on my cable system. And this is the Japanese news that is programmed for people outside of Japan. So it's all English speaking and whatnot. And I was watching the news once, and they were talking about this rural town, and I wish I had written it down because I don't even know where it was. This rural town in Japan that had what they decided to do was they found all of the vacant lots in the town, and they put them together into one big lot, and then they sold that lot to not a department store, a grocery store from Tokyo, who came out and built like a big greenhouse on that land. And it became a big boon for the town because it brought in employees who were there to work in the greenhouse. And then it brought in people to work in the area. And it gave the town a new life. And so I thought, that's a really great idea for a story, right? We'll get this. And that's how my Cozy Mystery series was birthed, because I thought that would be a great thing for a story. Like, it would bring in some new people into a small town.
Yeah.
Be great for, great for new suspects, new people who are shaking things up, So that was my original inspiration for the story.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, because that's the thing about cozy mysteries that they're so often set in a small town or a rural setting. And so you do, as a writer, we do need to think about getting new people coming to the place where you've set the mystery. So that's a really clever idea.
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun. When I found that story, I thought this is exactly what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so my main character, Mei, she does feel like a failure. Like she left her small town like everybody else does in Japan, it seems like now. She left her small town to go into the city to make a life for herself. And she didn't do a really good job of it. And so she comes back home and she realizes that now that her town has got this revitalization happening, that there are opportunities still there for her. So that brought about some really great ideas too for the plot and stories for coming books from now.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And so the series is referred to as she's referred to as the Daydreamer Detective. Can you tell us why that is?
Well, this is one of the reasons why she didn't do too well in her previous
Oh,
life in Tokyo, was that she often thinks about or daydreams her life away. She thinks about like what she could be doing, or like she dreams that she is the best employee in the job, but she's actually the worst, or whatever it may be. But she often lets her imagination take her away from her current life, which is something that I think a lot of us can sympathize with. Sure, there have been many times when you've been caught staring out into space because you're thinking about something else. So she's often caught up in her own thoughts in a separate world inside of her head.
hmm.
It can get her into trouble when she's supposed to be listening or paying attention. But other times it does spark new ideas for what may be happening in the mystery. So I figured it was a fun new way of having my main character do something different.
Hmm. Yes. Okay. And so, with all that you've learned about Japanese culture and with the trips that you've taken to Japan, do you ever find that it's a little tricky, sort of translating that when you're writing about the place and about the culture?
Oh, absolutely. The good thing is that I had sort of been through that before on my science fiction series, which is also Japanese. So I had a bit of testing already done in that regard. So I made sure that anytime that I used a Japanese word in the book, that I tried to explain it right away.
Okay.
There is in the second book in the series, the Daydreamer Detective braves the winter. It's wintertime, and in Japan, it's very cold in houses during the winter. So they use this called a kotatsu, which is like a low table, very low to the ground, and your legs up, and it's warm underneath. So it's like a heated floor table, and they're absolutely heavenly. And they usually come with like a very big blanket that you put over yourself. Lots of people often will have their snack at the kotatsu and then fall asleep, because why wouldn't you? Because it's lovely and warm and it's winter outside. So when I mention the kotatsu in the book, I say we sat down at the kotatsu, and I put in commas right after it, the heated floor table. So hopefully it's like everybody gets to learn a little bit of Japanese and understand what it is at the same time. So I've been through that, and I know not to introduce too many foreign words in one book, but it's also fun to show the different dynamics between people. Like May is very deferential to her mother. Her mother is she's the matriarch of the family. She lays down the rules and you follow them. And the same goes for, you know, when when she talks to like other people of her mother's generation.
Mm.
But when she's with her friends, her personality changes and warms up a little bit more, which is more of the friendly Japanese setting. And then also when she tries she can be a little bit mouthy, but when she talks to other people, she definitely shows them respect that they deserve. So, and that's not something that is necessarily as big in Western culture as it is there.
Right. And so this hierarchical aspect of Japanese culture, um, do you find that you've had that in the narrative, have you had to get Mei to explain it, or is it explained kind of by the way she acts? How does that work?
Oh, it's both, definitely. We can tell when she's talking to her mother that she will defer to her mom's opinion on things. And there are times in the internal dialogue when she thinks that she's like, no, this is not something we should be doing. I want to be more modern. I want to be more Western, but I know that it's not going to go over with mom so much. So I'm going to agree with her for now, even if I don't really agree with her. So we get to hear her thoughts about why she feels the way that she feels. And there have been times when she has come out and said, no, it really shouldn't be like that. We're modern women now. we don't live in 1950s Japan, and we should do it like this. And her mom will listen to her because she does respect her opinion. The two have clashed on occasions, but I think that that's part of life. They're two different generations, and her mom is very conservative and cares about the family farm, and Mei is the new modern woman, and they both have to bend a little bit to make sure that they can get along because they're living together now.
Right, yeah.
hmm
Um, and one thing I wanted to ask you, because you also have a science fiction series,
hmm
and several other books as well. Do you find that, um, do you find that your readers will read across all your series, especially the ones that are sort of Japanese focused? Or, like, in other words, are they fans of Japan as well? Or do people who read science fiction stick with that series, and then people who like mysteries stick with the Mei series?
Good question. The When I this past year started building up my mailing list, and inviting more people to be a part of the mailing list, I gave them the option of getting all of my newsletters, so getting everything about my science fiction and my mystery, or getting one or the other. And quite a few people want all of them.
Hmm.
So a, there's a small set of people that just want science fiction, and there's a small subset of people that just want mystery, but then there's a huge portion that want all of my newsletters. I think that I appeal to like these three different areas. So I'm guessing if you did like one of those Venn diagrams or whatever, where the circles like cross each other and you get that little spot in the middle,
Yeah.
I appeal to like some people who like science fiction and some people who like mystery, and then some people who like Japan. So I get like these amalgam of people. It's like some people. I do get letters from people who have written to me and said, that they lived in Japan for a while and they love my stories because it reminds them of the time that they spent there, or they work for a Japanese company and they understand the level of hierarchy and that it like appeals to them. I've gotten letters from people who grew up there in like the 60s and 70s, which was really cool. And they told me about like the time that they spent there and how my books bring back those memories for them. So that's all really cool. And I'm glad that there are some people who cross over who will read both the sci-fi and who will also read the mystery because of the Japanese, like the glue that's part of all of my books. So I think I've written one book that had a Korean male protagonist, and it didn't like it. I love that book, and it's a great book, but I feel like my Japan stuff is what really speaks to people. So I've
Right.
stuck with that.
Yeah. That's great. And I think it's such a unique premise. And, I interview a lot of mystery authors, a lot of cozy mystery authors specifically. And your books are the first that are really, that I've come across. I'm sure there are others, but your books are the first I've come across that are set in the Far East. And so when you had this idea, did you have any hesitation about that it would be difficult to kind of market the books to cozy mystery author or readers?
Oh, absolutely. But all of my books are hard to market. So
Okay.
it was like, oh, it's just another challenge, like all the other challenges I'm already used to. But it is kind of fun that I can say, well, it's a cozy mystery and it's in Japan. That's seriously like my main line. It's a cozy mystery in Japan. And people look at me and say, oh, okay, great.
Yeah, I get that.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, right. So like when I tried to explain myself, sci-fi, it gets a little bit more nebulous, but the cozy mysteries are very easy in that regard. A lot of people who like international cozy mysteries, like ones that are set in, like England or Ireland or any one of these other international locations, seem to gravitate towards my work, which is cool too. So I have just been I've been overwhelmed by the fact that this is one of my the first book in the series, one of my more popular books. Like, it has 90 reviews now. I've never had 90 reviews on anything before. So it's really exciting to see that it is getting picked up a little bit and people are reading it and are checking it out.
Right. And do you plan to carry on with the series for a while?
I have at least 5 or 6 books planned for this one. It might go on from there because I'm a little bit of a pantser. I like to feel out my stories as I go. So sometimes something will come up in one book that I'll think, oh, that's a great introduction to like the next book. And so I may not even come across it until I actually write it. But I also have an idea for one of the side characters in this series. She would make a great like spin-off. So also cozy mystery, maybe in a different part of Japan with some different characters. But yeah, I have plenty of books planned. So we'll see how it goes.
Yes, yeah. And do you alternate between the science fiction and the cozy mysteries?
Yeah, so last year I spent the better part of the year working on the first two books of the cozy mysteries, and then getting the third one ready, which came out earlier this year. And then I went back to my sci-fi for a little bit. So at this point, I think I'm going to be doing, a little sci-fi, a little mystery, a little sci-fi, a little mystery. I'm going to try and make it so that each one of my properties gets at least 2 books a year. This year was only 3 books. So I'm hoping for 4 books next year. So 2 and 2.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Well, this has been amazing, Stephanie. It's been so great chatting with you. So one last question before we go. Well, 2 last questions, I guess.
Okay.
How much of your Japanese language have you kept since taking those classes?
You know what? It's hit or miss. So when I went to Japan last year, I tried to use it as much as I could. And the Japanese are very flattering. They always say, if you try to use any Japanese with them, they'll say, "Oh, jozu desu ne," which means you're so skilled. and right? And I know that my Japanese is bad, so I understand that they're flattering me. I say, "Oh, thank you, arigato gozaimasu, thank you very much," and we'll speak a little bit in my broken Japanese about where I learned and where I'm from, which is nice. But they're so nice and so helpful that it's great being there and actually using my Japanese. I wouldn't say that it's very good, but when I watch a lot of Japanese on TV, I'm able to pick up a lot of things. Like, I hear the words that I'm used to, that I know. I think that my biggest weakness right now with Japanese is sentence structure. Like, I forget how to put sentences together, so I may remember a lot of words and get the gist of a conversation from somebody, then speaking back to them and putting words into sentences is the hardest part for me.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Well, I admire you very much. It's amazing to have a second language like that.
It is a lot of fun.
Great. Well, this has been great. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can learn more about you and your books?
You can find me online. My last name is Pajonas, and so you can find me at spajonas.com. spajonas.com. And you can find all of my books there, and all of my social media. I'm on Facebook as SJ Pajonas, and I'm on Twitter as @SPajonas.
Very good. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Stephanie.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to be here today.
Oh, you're welcome. Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you.